The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog, the Canadian Open research, picks, course preview. EPatt from The Score, Eric Patterson, is going to be joining me to talk about his experience playing the course on Media Day a few weeks ago, because this is the first time we're ever going to see TPC Toronto as a PGA Tour event, and we better get used to it because it sounds like it's going to be at TPC Toronto for a while. Next year at least, and then Golf Canada's moved its headquarters there, so expect this to be the anchor location, and which is not necessarily great. I prefer more of a rota, but this is just going to be the way it is. Probably better than Glen Abbey, like we saw 3,000 times in a row, so it's not going to be quite what we think. Smash like, sub to the channel while you're here. I'll have my newsletter out with a full breakdown on Monday afternoon, and if you do not have tickets to the Pat Mayo Experience live show next Saturday, June 7th, in Toronto, next to the CN Tower, next to Skydome, at the Rec Room, come join us. It's going to be a blast. Me, Pizzola, Cam, Rob, Cust, obviously, Garion, plus a bunch of other friends. Tons of tickets are still available. I mean, tons of tickets are still available, but there's only limited seating left for some of those tickets. So if you get one now, you'll probably get a seat. If not, you'll be standing room only, but it's going to be a vibe. There's going to be a Q&A, a hangout session afterwards. Highly encourage everyone to come down. You can get your tickets down in the description right now. So before we dig into the course breakdown, which EPatt will walk me through and then have a bit more of a discussion, and the model breakdown, care of fantasynational.com. Big news on Fantasy National coming very soon, by the way. Really good news for all of you who are subbed and are a member at fantasynational.com. I just want to talk about the Canadian Open and how it's been revived over the past 6 years or so, and it's all due to circumstances that were uncontrollable and nothing that they really did. One thing they did was a really savvy move. Other than that, a bunch of chips just fell into place to elevate this tournament back up to something that seems to mean something. And as a Canadian, I've always enjoyed the Canadian Open, but in the mid-2010s, this tournament was off the rails. You had Dustin Johnson because he was an RBC-sponsored player, and the C tier of the PGA Tour. Like, we got a lot of Johnny Vegas in our life. I like Johnny Vegas enough, but when he's like the third best player at your event every single year, is not great news. You'd have Jim Furyk or Brandt Snedeker or Hunter Mahan. They would be the leads in the field, and these were the guys that were winning the Canadian Open in 2010 and 2014. Tim Clark won at Royal Montreal, I think, in 2012. And then you got to Glen Abbey, which is a very uninspired course that was a bomber's paradise, and you just had the lower rung of talent on the PGA Tour. So what changed? Well, the biggest thing that happened to begin with was the schedule change from 2018 to 2019. For years, even when we all remember, maybe we don't all remember, I'm getting old, so I remember Tiger Woods hitting that 6-iron out of the bunker at Glen Abbey to beat Grant Wade. I believe that was in 2000. And that was when the Canadian Open, then the Bell Canadian Open, was played in September. And that was an okay date. Obviously, they don't play real tournaments in September anymore on the PGA Tour. The FedEx Cup concludes the third week of August, so that's just not available on the schedule at this point. So it got shifted to the week after the Open Championship, which is a death knell for basically any tournament, especially one that's a national open, carried prestige. This is the site of Jack Nicklaus's first ever win. It's the third oldest Open Championship in the world and the second longest running PGA Tour event of all the events. Weirdly enough, the BMW Championship, not then called the BMW Championship, is the longest running event on the PGA Tour, the Canadian Open being number 2. So it got moved to after the British Open, and no great players would come and play unless they were obligated to. That meant all the Canadians, because they feel the national obligation to come play, Dustin Johnson, and a handful of others that RBC would be sponsoring at the time. That would be about it. So in 2019, the schedule, I'm going to say it like I'm British at this point, got shifted, and now the Canadian Open is the week before the US Open. At first glance, that seems like a terrible spot for anything to be. Better than after the Open Championship, but the week before a major, not great, except a lot of players actually enjoy to play the week before a major championship to fine-tune their game. And that was in 2019. It was being contested at Hamilton Country Club, where it was a year ago when Robert McIntyre won in 2014, or 2024. I can't even get my decades right at this point. But Hamilton's a great course. It's a great location for the Canadian Open as well. You can take the train. You can go to the Sky Dome, basically where we're having our live show. Take a train to Hamilton. Just be there in 40 minutes. You don't have to drive. And Hamilton has a bunch of people anyway. It's a pretty big city. It's just about 45 to an hour south of Toronto, all a part of the Golden Horseshoe. And I know that the joke has become the Ontario Open, not the Canadian Open. EPatt and I will discuss that more a little bit later on. There should be a rota of both Ontario, Quebec, and Alberta and British Columbia courses, because there's just beautiful courses out there. And it's not like they don't have people. These are cities with over 1 million people in them. They could most definitely sustain themselves a Canadian Open. We saw it at Shaughnessy, which was such an awesome course. Sean O'Hare won that year. That probably wasn't great, but it played like a US Open style track. And one of the things that I have enjoyed, well, these have not been the most difficult courses the past 4 times we've played since it's been before the US Open. They have tried to grow out the rough a little bit just to not necessarily mimic what's going to happen at the US Open. Obviously, you cannot do that based on the size of the courses, the USGA setups, the firmness of the greens, and the Canadian Open doesn't want that. They want it to be a test. They don't want it to be the easiest course and the easiest tournament on tour. But they also don't want to make it like a +1 winner at the same time. I think the sweet spot for them is like -12, -13. It was -16 a year ago when Robert McIntyre won. But all that being said, so you get the schedule change. That turned out to be a huge benefit, even with the advent of the signature events, with Memorial happening either the week before, or I believe a year ago it was the week after, and it was 2 weeks before the US Open, the Canadian Open would go. But right now, as we're playing it in its current iteration, it's after the Memorial, so all of the best players, sans Rory, this week, because he is going to play in the Canadian Open, he wanted to take some time off, that the schedule will go signature event, Canadian Open, US Open, signature event for the Travelers Championship, which seems like an unenviable position to be as a part of the schedule. But differences have happened, and something has bailed out the Canadian Open, and we're trying to figure out why that has been the case. Because versus essentially any other major championship or signature event, this is probably the best field of the year, top to bottom. And it cannot be a signature event because it's an open championship. People go across the country and qualify for this event. That's a major, important part of this tournament's history, and that's not going to change. You can't turn this into a 70-player limited field no-cut event. It just doesn't work like that. That's not the history of this event and how they want to continue that history and importance going forward, especially north of the border, nationally for us, that just like the US Open, people should have the ability to go qualify for this if they're so able to and go play themselves into this tournament. And that's continuously what we see. So they've actually moved one of the US Open qualifiers to Toronto itself. So guys that are playing in this tournament that are not currently qualified for the US Open can go play on the Monday or on the Tuesday to see if they can get themselves in. So that's one big benefit. They've made it easier for people to do that. So 2019, Rory wins in Hamilton. He beats, I think it was GMAC and Shane Lowry that year, ended up coming in second. Very good field. But why did Rory play in 2019? And this has been kind of the question of why Rory continuously comes to Canada. Rory has saved this event as a part of some of the other things that have happened. So you can't pay players to come play in a PGA Tour event like you could. Basically, it's what LIV does. LIV took that model that the Saudi International used to have pre-LIV, where they would pay Dustin Johnson $3 million to go play a week in Saudi Arabia, and a bunch of people to come over and play that week. If they won, they'd get extra money, and whatever they did on the score sheet, they would get paid based on the tournament. They also got a show-up fee to come play. You cannot do that on the PGA Tour. However, there's back ways to do this if you really want to. You can't pay Rory $3 million to come play in the Canadian Open, but you can pay him $3 million to give a 10-minute speech at a dinner on Tuesday night, if that's the way that you want to play it. So maybe there's some sort of shenanigans. Great investment by whoever it was, RBC, Golf Canada, whoever it might be, to get Rory to come up. And Rory wins. He wins by 7 strokes with an amazing final round in 2019. That was also the first year that we saw a flood of college players start to come out. And this is a part of what we're seeing this week too, with Gordon Sargent and Luke Clanton officially turning professional and playing in the RBC Canadian Open this week. And it's been accelerated more with PGAU. We saw Morikawa in 2019. That was his first tournament. I believe Hovland played that year as well, his first time as a professional. And then Ludwig made his pro debut at Oakdale in 2023. It's the first time after the college season ends that these guys can actually say, hey, I'm done being an AM. I am now officially a professional, and this is the first tournament on the schedule. So that works as a big benefit. Not only that you get to see some of these young players come out anyway, but it also, it doesn't necessarily engender a loyalty to an event, but we've seen a lot of these guys continue to repeat their appearances at the Canadian Open because this is the spot where they first played on the PGA Tour. It means something to them, and they were allowed into the tournament, so you can buy low on some of these young players that you might get some name brand power coming back. Like Ludwig is in the field again this week. Why? Presumably because he played here in 2013. They gave him the opportunity, and now he's just coming back. Not necessarily every year, but most years he's coming. But the Rory win was huge. Then COVID happened, so there was no 2020 tournament. And then because of border restrictions and the difference between what the Canadian, like crossing the Canadian border, going back into the United States, quarantine rules, that was still going on in 2021 at the time of this tournament. So there was no Canadian Open in 2021. So we missed 2 years of the tournament. And then all of a sudden there was a reshuffle with the courses. Glen Abbey was going to be turned into a condo facility. I believe it's still there. I don't think that ever actually happened. That was a terrible course. Fun course to play. But as a PGA Tour event, it lacked any teeth whatsoever. Just a huge space across the ground. Just go bombs away and you're going to be absolutely fine. Instead, they came back to the city. So Hamilton was the closest thing that we got to this. The last time there was an actual in-city tournament for the Canadian Open in Toronto itself was 1968, I believe, and that was at St. George's. And then St. George's again became the host site in 2022. And that was a weird year because LIV was just announced, and all these guys were leaving for LIV in 2022. So what happened? The Canadian Open was sort of ground zero for what is going on with LIV. Why are all these guys going? So the PGA Tour, for about a month period, put together an all-star field lineup. So that year, Rory ended up winning at St. George's. Scheffler was there, Justin Thomas was there, Xander was there, Sam Burns was there. It was a very top-heavy field of all of the best remaining PGA Tour players because they were putting on a unified front in order to play in this tournament. And because it was at a city course, these city courses are not huge layouts. They're not fitting 120,000 people on. They fit a lot of people, but it felt intimate. It felt condensed. They started the penalty box hole. It had the vibes of the Waste Management Open, but not like the horrendous part that the Waste Management Open has turned into. It had good vibes throughout the course. Everything was clustered all in certain spots. There was a ton of fans. Everyone was vibrant. It was just a vibe to be on that course. I really feel like that's helped the Canadian Open tremendously over time, that it was fun to go this event. But you could take the subway to that event. You could take a 20-minute Uber to that event if you wanted to. So it got a lot of people who wouldn't normally make the trek down to Hamilton or go out to Oakville for Glen Abbey and spend an hour on the GO train after taking the subway down to the train anyway. It's just a hassle to get out to some of these places. It was not at St. George's. So the following year, it was at Oakdale. And Oakdale, another city course, is where Feinberg is a member. You can take the subway directly there if you want to. I played it last year with Jeff. I took a 20-minute Uber from downtown. Boom. Even in traffic, I was still there pretty easily. Very nice course. It has 27 holes, so they mashed together 18 holes to play the Canadian Open, and this became the most famous Canadian Open, probably since that Tiger shot. That was the Nick Taylor beats Tommy Fleetwood in the playoff, making the gigantic eagle putt, I believe on the third round of that playoff hole on number 18. But it had a really cool vibe that you had all the Canadian contingent there cheering on Nick Taylor as a part of that 18th hole. And obviously the crowd was getting very rowdy. There had not been a Canadian winner of the Canadian Open since Pat Fletcher in 1957. It's been a while. We've seen a lot of Canadians gag it down the stretch, even in 2004. When VJ tried to give Mike Weir the Canadian Open. Mike Weir wouldn't take it. He ended up losing in a playoff to VJ. We had a David Hearn run for a while where it looked like he was going to win. He went into the final day. I think Day or DJ ended up beating him in the end. regardless, it was an awesome vibe. It was an awesome scene. One of the most memorable moments from that year. You had Connors and Hadwin. I think Pendrith was there. Mike Weir as a part of the Canadian contingent on 18, just cheering on Nick Taylor along with the fans the entire time. And then right next to them, you had Rory and Rose and Lowry all cheering on Tommy Fleetwood to get his maiden PGA win. It was a really cool scene and, friendly. The Canadian way, more friendly than you'd probably see in some other places. And then you had Hadwin run onto the green when he made the putt. And boom, the security guard just ends up Goldberg spearing him directly into the green. They're popping champagne. It was awesome. It was a vibe. And that translated through to last year, to 2024, back when it was in Hamilton. Like I said, still very easy to get to. You can have those crowds. You can have the penalty box. And people can go and enjoy themselves, have a few drinks, and not have to worry about driving home because the public transportation, the trains, that was all available to everyone. But what we saw last year, especially after the Nick Taylor year, is that the Canadian Open doesn't feature very many top-end American players, which means we're not getting Scheffler, we're not getting Morikawa or Thomas or Xander at this point, and I completely understand why. I just mentioned the schedule. You have a run of 3 events, they're all obligated to play, and then this one sandwiched in between. They don't want to play 4 weeks in a row. I completely understand that, but because of the Rory influence, this has turned into what is essentially an international all-star game for the rest of the tournament, which really does elevate it above the third-rung PGA Tour events. The Scottish Open gets this bump too because it's the week before the Open Championship, so you see a lot of guys go over to get accustomed to playing on links golf before playing in the Open Championship. And for the Scottish Open, it's great. That's another national open. People do take pride in winning countries' national opens, and that's what's happening right now, at least internationally, for the Canadian Open. So when we take a look at the very top of this field, it's 156 players, but you got 8 of the top 25. RBC sponsors 3 other guys on the PGA Tour, American players, so they're going to end up playing. All the Canadians are here, and you have even like the next rung of European players playing. Tom Kim and Ben An and Sung Jae Im are all playing this week, all international players. Maybe they had a great time in Montreal. They want to come back for some Canadian vibes. But because of Rory bringing all the European players, like Tommy isn't playing this year, but we're still getting Ludwig, Rory, Lowry, all at the very top of the board, along with the Koreans that I mentioned. Who else do we have? Rose is going to be playing. Both Højgaards are playing. A lot of the Danes are playing this week. Both French players, Perez and Antoine Rosner, are going to be in the field, along with Pavon, plus all the high-end Canadians who've just gotten better. So you have Pendrith and Connors and Mac Hughes and Nick Taylor all coming to this event. I'm not going to pretend like this is a signature event and the field is that strong. It's not. But versus the Cognizant Classic and the Shell Houston Open in Valero, this is definitely a cut above all of those. And without Rory's influence on all of this, I don't think that the Canadian Open would be something that people look forward to at this point in time. And as EPatt and I will discuss, this is maybe I can quote Tim Andercust on this. This is a hinge year for the Canadian Open because it has moved to TPC Toronto. Now, TPC Toronto is a nicer course than Glen Abbey, but it has a lot of the same drawbacks as Glen Abbey is going to have just logistically. Despite being called TPC Toronto, this is nowhere near Toronto. It is northwest of the city. It's above Brampton. You have to go through like 4 separate city suburbs before you get to Alton, where this is. There is nothing there. So part of the experience was coming to the Canadian Open, playing these city courses. You got the great vibe from the city, but the players could all stay at the Ritz-Carlton. If they wanted, they could stay in 5-star luxury hotels and take a subway to the course if they wanted to. They could take a 10-minute Uber and get there. I'm sure there's a private shuttle for them to get there. And that's not going to be that different from this year, except that shuttle is now going to be probably 90 minutes. It'll be an hour if there's no traffic, which doesn't exist even on weekends in Toronto. So it's going to be a really long trek to the course. There's not a lot of places to stay around there. And then when I start thinking about the vibes that were so good for the Canadian Open in each of the past 4 iterations, is that going to translate when Everyone has to drive to the course or take a more than hour-long shuttle each way back and forth to some remote place. The course looks beautiful. I'm sure it's going to play beautiful. And maybe that's all that really matters, but there was something about this event that I feel like got propped up from the atmosphere. And I really worry with it being in a more remote location right now that you won't gather those crowds. The course itself is so much more expansive that the small city courses jammed everyone into one place, and that may have created that same atmosphere. I've been to TPC Scottsdale, and while that is a wide-ranging course, you do have 110,000 people there during one day. It's impossible for it not to be crowded. The attendance numbers for this are not going to be close to that. So I worry that you're going to be walking up and it kind of looks like a DP World Tour event outside of the penalty box area, which is a fun conceit, but I don't know how that translates when there's not that many people trying to get there at all times to keep up that high energy, to keep up those vibes. That I really hope it works out for the best, but I do have my worries that no matter how great that the course plays, how difficult it plays, and it could play difficult if the wind ends up picking up, because this can be a wind-ravaged course over time, and it looks like they're growing the rough up a lot to try to mimic a little bit, not quite as much as the U.S. Open, but enough that it's just not going to be bomb and gouge everywhere. You're going to have a modicum of accuracy in order to do this. So that's what it's my little mini rant about the Canadian Open. I want it to succeed, and I don't know if they've now put it in the best position to succeed. I hope I'm wrong. I'm wrong about a lot, so maybe it's clear sailing from here on out, and this will be the best location of all time. I'm just hoping enough people can get out to the course to make this worth their while. So I'm going to talk to Eric Patterson from The Score about the course. We'll look at the flyover and discuss the holes, the strategy, and what types of players should be coming out soon, right after this. I was having some problems sleeping. When anyone has little kids, that's probably going to be the case. They'll come up, wake you up in the middle of the night for no real apparent reason. So you're waking up, you're going back to sleep, you're waking up, going back to sleep. It's not the best sleep. I put my Apple Watch on and tried to track my sleep tracker. It was not going well. A lot of that changed once I got a Helix mattress, however, because I was able to customize it to both what I want, what my wife wants, and now we are sleeping throughout the night. The little noises that would just normally wake you up when you're not sleeping well, no longer the case for me. No more back pain either, because I'm actually sleeping on a mattress that is perfect for what my back demands, which is a lot because I have a terrible back. The one that I had before my Helix mattress, I spent a lot of money on it. It was bad after 2 years. It had the divot in it from where I sleep. It was unflippable. It was a horrendous waste of money. Not only is the Helix mattress I have now way better, it was also significantly cheaper. And it just showed up to my door in a box. Very easy to get onto my bed frame and just start using right away. So you can have all your problems solved with a Helix mattress as well. So you can go to helixsleep.com/Mayo for 20% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/Mayo for 20% off site-wide. Be sure to enter my name at the checkout so they know that I sent you. helixsleep.com/Mayo. I want you to think about two things. One, what makes your father special? Number two, what makes all fathers the same? The answer to number two is that they are impossible to buy Father's Day gifts for. Who knows what your dad needs? But I can tell you one thing that the vast majority, almost all of fathers enjoy: steak. Barbecuing. It's perfect. When it comes to Father's Day, some things never change. A recent survey shows 75% of Americans agree there's no better way to spend Father's Day than grilling with the family. So, shop omahasteaks.com and give your dad the legendary Heartland quality he deserves. Plus, my listeners get an extra $35 off with promo code MAYO at checkout. Omaha Steaks has been America's original butcher since 1917, a family-owned company with over 100 years of expertise in the meat industry. They also carry mouth-watering burgers, chicken, pork, seafood, dessert, and easy-to-prepare comfort food. This Father's Day, give Dad the world's best steak experience with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for a guaranteed perfect gifts that deliver legendary quality. For an extra $35 off, use promo code MAYO at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com and an extra $35 off with promo code MAYO at checkout. See site for details. As promised, I told you I'd bring him in. Eric Patterson from The Score got to play the media day at the course at TPC Toronto?
Media day, that's right. Yeah, they bring out a bunch of 15 cappers to chop it up and then write about the course and talk about the course. But yeah, it was quite a nice day, first round of the year. But yeah, fun course. Excited to talk about it and kind of see how these guys approach it and play it.
So, did you notice the different tee boxes? Because I see that it's going to play at right around 7,400 yards as a par 70. That's not all that dissimilar dimensions wise from what we saw at Colonial a few weeks back in terms of scorecard versus par. But we know that sometimes that there's hidden distance on courses, elevation changes. What can you tell us about this course? Because I've never, despite living in Toronto for 15 years, shockingly enough, this course nowhere near Toronto.
Yeah, the label TPC Toronto is a bit misleading. This course, how do I describe this? I mean, you get there and it's just massive. It's a big property. Everything just looks big. The fairways are wide. The greens are big. The tee decks, yeah, it's just expansive. If you're going to the tournament and you're not a fan of walking, then I'd recommend just pitching up and sitting down somewhere because it is a haul to get like from one side of the other. So it's just a huge course. Like you mentioned, 7,400 yards, par 70 it's actually very long, I would say. There's a couple short par threes and one short par four. So a lot of the distance is in the par fours. Sorry. I counted 6 of them are over 480 yards and 4 are over 500 yards. So it's just a big, big ballpark. And of course that, players like Rory McIlroy, Ludwig Oberg, guys like that can definitely separate from themselves.
Were you surprised to see the field being as strong as it is? Because it's essentially a warm-up game for the European Ryder Cup team.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a bad spot in the schedule. It always has been. Memorial, Canadian Open, US Open, and then Travelers, which is an elevated event. I like the Euros, they come out. I mean, Hatton showed up, Fleetwood used to show up. He's taking this year off, but Rory's there, Lowry, Rose, Oberg. Maybe it's something to do with, the national opens. Bobby Mack comes, they defending champ actually. Maybe just getting out of the States for a week isn't the worst thing for them and kind of getting a bit of a different culture. Although I think they're going to be a little bit confused as to why they're up in, kind of a small rural town in Ontario and not really in the heart of Toronto. But we'll see those players' reactions when they arrive on site.
Do you think that's going to affect the quality of this tournament field-wise, that maybe the players don't know what they're getting themselves into with the course being so far outside of the city center, where even if it's in Hamilton, you can stay in Toronto, travel to Hamilton. It's like 45 minutes on a train. You can basically get dropped off at the course. Or Hamilton, a city in its own right, you can just stay there. Where are these players even staying for this week?
Yeah, it's they're kind of spread out. There's a few resorts. There's some hotels in the area. I'm truthfully afraid that some might be just staying in like a Comfort Inn down the street. There's some hotels up by the airport, which I've heard that they're going to be staying at. So they're kind of spread out. Yeah, it's going to be about a 45-minute travel time for some of them to get there through, again, one-lane roads in rural Ontario and just not a lot going on. So I think it's a bit of a risk. I kind of when they announced that this course was going to host the tournament for this year and next year, I found it to be a bit of a risk just because the venues they've been going to the last few years, Hamilton, even Oakdale's pretty much in the city, St. George's. These are like old timey courses that just are kind of classics. Whereas this just isn't that. There's not a lot of I don't know, or history. There's not really much going on. It's just a big ballpark that, is from the 90s. So it's, first year, we'll see how they react. Next year is going to be very telling to kind of let us know how they felt about the whole experience. And if the field takes a significant drop off, then we'll know that, this experiment didn't really work out.
It's not so much for the field. Like, there's lots of different courses throughout the course of the schedule where it's not a downtown course. I'm sure that those are fun to do, and most of them are in some rural area. Even something like Muirfield Village is in the suburbs of Columbus. It's up near Ohio State rather than I don't know what downtown Columbus looks like. Never been there. Maybe there's not much going on, but like a major city like this, where even when it was at Jeff's course, when it was at Oakdale or Royal St. George's, is it Royal St. George's or just St. George's?
I think it's no Royal.
There's no Royal. That makes way more sense. But you can get on the subway and go to these courses. So the crowds were kind of electric the past few years. And that's what I worry about the most here is who is going to like me. I'm doing my live show in town for the Canadian Open. It's on Saturday. Zero chance I get out to the course. If it was at Jeff's course, which I'm playing the day before, where it was 2 years ago, where it's supposed to be this year, I would go to that. It would take me 20 minutes to get there on a subway.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm in a few group chats where guys are asking, who's going. There's a kid who lives out east side of Toronto, and it's like a 2-hour trip for him. And
Each way.
he could probably jump on a subway or some kind of public transit to get to one of those city courses, but he's just no interest in going to this tournament because it is far. I'll just say that there's a ton of population around the course. It just 30 minutes away in all sorts of directions. It's easy to get to just because there are, a lot of roads and different routes you can take. It's not like, Hamilton was kind of stuck. There's basically one street where you can get in and out. So that's kind of a bit of a nightmare from a travel standpoint. I'm sure they've figured out in terms of shuttle parking at different sites. I'm not overly worried about the crowds. I just do think because it is such a big course that the crowds are going to feel smaller than they might like actually be there. Like Hamilton and some of those other courses, you can crowd around some greens and it feels very busy. Whereas this is it might not feel that way just because of how expansive the property is.
It's been fun the past few years, and maybe because of that condensed nature of some of the, especially the city courses where there's just not a lot of room to maneuver around. And just my experience of having played Oakdale last year after seeing it when Nick Taylor ended up beating Fleetwood in the playoff, that you can see how it would feel big when it's there. Like it doesn't feel small when you're there, but you can see that there's not a lot of spots to go walk around. That I did feel like that helped with the atmosphere though. I wouldn't
For
want
sure.
like this was the big reason that it got taken out of Glen Abbey to begin with, is that there was no atmosphere at Glen Abbey unless Tiger was playing, which hadn't happened since 2000.
Yeah, the tournament has taken on a bit of a different life since those Glen Abbey days for whatever reason. Like 20, I guess Rory shows up and wins it. It takes on a life of its own. And I'm hoping that they can carry that momentum into this tournament. But it does remind me of a course, I don't know if you've ever played Angus Glen, but back in the mid 2000s, it kind of gave me that Angus Glen feel where it's like there's one hole kind of, you're separated almost in every hole. There's not a lot of like crossover. There's not like one spot where you can kind of sit and watch multiple greens and a couple tee blocks. It's very spread out, like I've been saying. So I'm interested. I'm definitely going to be on property and checking it out. And I think the crowds will show up. It's just, I don't know exactly how well it's going to be received. It's got the TPC label. So as we know, the PGA Tour likes to return to the TPC courses. So it's probably going to be in the rotation for the next, decade. Golf Canada is making it their headquarters. So it's just, they're kind of going all in on this spot. So it's definitely going to be a very, very interesting and compelling tournament.
And maybe there'll be stuff that pops up around it as well in coming years. But as you said, the Golf Canada is moving its facilities here, their headquarters. And it's the city courses don't want the Canadian Open is the problem. Like Oakdale, the membership, it wasn't Jeff. Jeff voted for the Canadian Open again, but the other guys were like, nah, we're not doing this again. We're not losing 4 weeks of the summer. There's not an abundance of high quality city courses that you can just give up a month.
Yeah, and St. George's was the same. They were supposed to host it again, and there was a pitch for them to host it again, and the members have said this has been too much for us. They're spending 6 figures to play this course, and they lose it for a month and a half. That's why the TPC model works. The PGA Tour shows up and says we're basically part owners of this course. You can't really tell us no. So here we are, and we're gonna host a huge tournament here. And this property has 3 courses. If there's a couple 9s on the other courses that are still open for public play. So there's still people coming in and out. But yeah, it's definitely going to be here for a while. So let's we're gonna have to get used to it, and hopefully the players like it.
So when I spoke about hidden distance to begin with, this is kind of what I'm alluding to. And you kind of mentioned it with the really long par fours. And Colonial sucked up a lot of its energy and yardage into its super long par 5, which I think was like 655, and 4 really long par 3s. You take those out of the equation and you have a bunch of less than driver holes off the tee and hit whatever you want into it. Get to your spot and fire away as long as you're in the fairway. Here, it's kind of the opposite. There's only 2 par 5s, 1 and 18 are par 5. So I'm just going to throw it out that if you're playing, although number 2 might not be the easiest hole with 481, when you get the wraparound, there's a 440, a 500, and a 416. And maybe that 500 plays easier than it looks. I don't know, as hole number 9. But if you're trying to get a DraftKings streak going from back to front and having 18 and 1 in succession is probably the move.
Yeah, that's when I saw the scorecard. The 2 par 5s back to back that's kind of your bread and butter. 17, I would say. So for this course, they've kind of flipped 8 and 17. So the 17 on the scorecard that you see is probably going to be the hardest hole on the course. A 530-yard par 4 typically plays as a par 5 for public play. It's usually number 8. So I guess they want to put like a late bogey chance on the scorecard before you get to 18, which is going to play shorter than 581 just because there's a downslope, kind of like the fairway leading in towards the pond in front of the greens, basically like a speed slot. So you could see a lot of guys going bogey eagle to close out their rounds there on 17 and 18. But yeah, there's not like a big stretch of holes where you're like, oh, they're definitely going to pile up birdies here. 18 to 1 is basically the only spot. And then number 2 it's long, but it's nothing crazy. There's a lot of the holes that when I play it, you stand on the green, you kind of look back and they start to look the same. It's kind of like a sweeping dog leg to an elevated green. You'll see that on 2, 3, 12 is like that. 9 is like that. So it does have a kind of a repetitive look to it from when you're standing on the green. But yeah, there's just not a lot of birdie opportunities out there. And it shows this 2024, the PGA Tour Americas, formerly PGA Tour Canada. Anyways, they had a tournament here and the winning score was 5 under. So this course is probably going to play very hard. I was talking to a guy who works there and says the owner doesn't want to be embarrassed. When I played it, the rough wasn't super long compared to what it was like at St. George's and Oakdale and Hamilton, but it's been very wet and rainy here in Ontario for a while. So I could see the rough growing up. Again, very long course. I would expect the winning score to be right around like 10 under if the wind doesn't pick up.
I think that would be a good look for the Canadian Open. 10
it's
anywhere between like 8 and 13 under is a good look.
It's going to be quite the challenge. They actually hosted another PGA Tour Canada event in 2019, and the winning score was 25 under, if you can believe it. So they came in, did a renovation, lengthened it by almost 300 yards, and changing it from a par 72 to a par 70 will help knock a few shots off the scorecard there.
It's funny just to think about that because people were complimenting Colonial. Minus 12 is a really good score. Like that's the scores that we want to see on the PGA Tour. It's like, yeah, if they just played some of those longer par 4s as a par 5, like they do at some courses, the winning score is minus 20, and then you're all up in arms. Like it's exactly the same amount of shots.
Yeah, basically goes back to par's kind of irrelevant, doesn't really matter. These holes are, 20 yards and changes it from a par 4 to a par 5. It's basically equally as hard, just a different score a number on the scorecard. But in 2019, Paul Barjon, your guy.
Long Dong, Paul Barjon.
So if you look at the top 3, it's Barjon, Pendrith, and Jake Knapp. Just completely bombs away in 2019.
Was that the 25 under year?
Yeah, that was 25 under pre-renovation. They basically just moved a bunch of tees back and cut down, kind of shaved off some spots around the green. So it's a lot more short grass you're chipping off of instead of, the typical rough. You'll see that on 2 is a substantial one, and 18 actually instead of having a bunker in front of the green that separates the green and the water, it's now just basically a straight runoff slope. So there's a chance guys are going for it in 2, and this is what they wanted on 18 is a little bit of drama. If you're going for it in 2 and you're like a yard short, you're probably rolling back into the water, and if you're a yard further, you're on the green and probably putting for eagle. So it's definitely a bit of a risk reward there on 18. So that could actually make it quite exciting on the final hole.
So what year did you say the other PGA Tour of America's year was?
2024. It hosted like their tour championship. So it was the last event, played in September, which changes kind of how the course would play. Again, it's been very wet here in Ontario throughout May. But in 2024, they told me that it was super windy. It kind of bared out in the stats. I went through the top 5 finishers, guys I'd never heard of, but it was all like, the guy who won was second in scrambling. A few other guys were first in scrambling. He was 2 back. 10th in scrambling came second. So it just turned into a scramble fest because no one was hitting greens. It was so windy. I mean, I don't have wind finder up yet, but it's definitely something to watch for.
Yeah, but on a property this large, I would guess that just even looking from the flyover stuff that we've been doing, there's trees, but it's not like it's blocking wind.
No, it's like basically a wide open farmer's field. Everything around it's a farmer's field. So yeah, it's not like it's condensed into a forest. If it gets windy, this place will be extremely hard. There's another like links course on the property, which is, predicated on playing in wind. So you can get very windy there. And if it does, I mean, this place is going to be, it's going to be a brute.
Well, it's funny because it will change the entire dynamic of the players that we probably want to target. That this course seems designed for Rory to go kill everyone at.
Yeah, this is like when Rory shows up, and even like Oberg announced that he was going to play. I'm like, well, yeah, this is a perfect course for him. Even Luke Clanton, I think he could probably contend making his PGA Tour debut.
Even to go like this field is seriously strong. Like Higo, I feel like is kind of good for here, just based on the way that he can absolutely mash the ball. Bobby Mack just still plays well and wins. Dominates par 70s too, which is really weird. Pendrith, Novak are all in one bucket of type player. Wyndham Clark is in the field. Cam Young is in the field. I don't know what's going on with Sahith, but you can kind of flip it the other way as well, that if the wind does pick up, obviously Lowry, Bobby Mack would kind of fall into that bucket again. Alex Noren is in the field. Then you get someone like even Hadwin or Kuchar, that all of a sudden that these guys become viable options. I do like that. If it is, certain conditions are going to dictate, I think, the type of players that I want to go to. Problem is that Rory also falls into that other bucket too, that he can scramble his way out of anything.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a tournament where we have to watch the forecast leading into it. Like you said, if it's windy, I don't think anyone's really going to be hitting many greens. The greens are actually, from playing it, I found them kind of small. Like they're not like expansive. Like you're not going to end up with a bunch of 50, 60 footers. They're relatively small for how big the course is, which makes it again a little bit more challenging because these guys are going to be hitting, I think I counted there's like multiple shots, maybe 6 or 7 from 180 in if you're hitting it like 315 off the tee, and that 315 is a big poke. So if you're averaging at 300 off the tee, you're going to be hitting long irons in all day. So it's going to be a big test of ball striking. And honestly, I think they designed this place just to have Rory win it so they can keep coming back. It's like it's perfectly tailored for him.
That's not a bad strategy if you want to get people to watch and come to your event.
No, I mean, he's skipping Jack's tournament just to play in the Canadian Open. So, or maybe that's part of the reason, but Canada loves him. He's in all the ads. I don't know if you've seen any of the ads for it, but it's our players, and it's Mackenzie Hughes, Corey Connors, Taylor Pendrith, and then they put a picture of Rory McIlroy there as well. I'm like, he's not exactly Canadian, but I guess we'll adopt him.
I was surprised. I know that they allow so many Canadian amateurs and qualifiers into the field, but I was more surprised that they don't have more of an exemption to DP World Tour players for this event as well. Although a lot of them, they're not DP World Tour players now, but even someone like Victor Perez is in the field. A lot of guys that qualified through DP and came from Europe, even at the mid-tier and lower levels, have decided to play in Canada. Now, most of these guys are not invited to Jack's Place or to the Travelers following the U.S. Open. But I think that's another pipeline that they can exploit. Like, I'm surprised that Eugenio's not here and Jordan Smith isn't here. That would be the sort of field padding that I would want to do for a tournament like this.
Yeah, you mentioned Eugenio Chacarra. I thought, this would be a good course for him too. It's interesting how there are so many internationals. We just had, Sung Jae and Tom Kim committed too. So, Canada is kind of a multicultural area. There's going to be a lot of, different nations represented. So you make a good point to bring those kind of guys in because there's fans of everyone all over the place in Canada, Japanese, South Korean, we've got it all.
And you have to remember too, that based on the schedule, every American player is going to play in the 3 tournaments that are not this one in this 4-week stretch. And then you get even the Scotties, all the Texas players are going to play in the Texas tournament. I don't blame them. Why would they come up to Canada to play? But if you want to, it's the 3rd oldest national open in the world. I feel like it really lost its luster, as you mentioned, that pre-Rory winning it and then coming back every single year. He basically, as you mentioned, saved this tournament because it was Johnny Vegas versus Charlie Hoffman every year.
Yeah, it kind of got dragged through the mud. It was the week after the Open Championship forever. And basically no one played the tournament. I remember going, mid 2000s, and it was like Jim Furyk was the best player and he used to win it all the time. But we had winners like Ches Reavie, and there was some, Tim Clark, I think, won it. There's just like some very mediocre winners and not a lot of star power that showed up. But this tournament's actually turning into kind of like the NCAA season's actually just ending this week, I believe. And it's also kind of like a launching point for a lot of people's careers. I believe Morikawa made his first pro start here, and Oberg made his first pro start here. Clanton's doing it. I don't know if there's another guy. I think his name's David Ford. He's first in the NCAAs. I'm not sure if he's in, but he's got a PGA Tour card if he wants it. So he could be making his first pro start here. So it's almost evolving into like the first place we get to see these guys as a pro. I mean, we've seen Clanton, but Oberg was kind of that guy. Nick Taylor year when Jeff was yelling at him. That was his first pro start.
Bad course for Ludwig too. This course sounds like it's a lot better. Which hole is going to be the penalty box? Is it 14 or 4? I'm guessing it'd be 14.
It's 14. Yeah. So traditionally plays 190 from the back tees. They moved it up basically to like the white tee decks where we all played in media day. So it's like 140 yards. There hasn't been a hole in one at the rink hole yet since its existence. Every time they play it, it's like 190 yards uphill, like a very tough iron shot, and guys are just scrambling to make par. So I think they just, they moved the tee decks up, let these guys get a wedge in their hand, and they're definitely hoping for a lot more birdies and potentially hole-in-ones there. So maybe, there's not a lot of hole-in-one opportunities, but, if they're trying to drum up some excitement, maybe they find a funnel pin. The yes hole-in-one market may be somewhere to look.
Yeah, if you're out there earlier, let us know where the pins are going to be, or at least if they're testing out a few ones in the practice rounds, that if there is a funnel opportunity for that, if you see it out there. There's another short par 3. The other two, though, 237 and 225. Are these just make par and get out of dodge holes?
Both over water. Very tough. Depending on the wind, I think they play in opposite directions, so there's a chance like one's completely downwind and one's straight into the wind. So yeah, it's not an easy course. Like I wouldn't recommend anyone of like 10 or higher handicap to go play this course from deep tees. Definitely move it up, but it's not designed really to be a public friendly course. They just wanted a championship caliber course on the property, and this is what they've turned out. They know they have 2 other courses there that anyone can play, but this is a course where you got to bring it and you got to be able to hit it off the tee.
So it looks like even both days, if you're sweating the cut, I guess 18 is a reprieve because it could be an eagle hole. But if there is that water in front of it that you can roll back into, it might be one of those ton of eagles are made, but a ton of doubles or worse are made at the same time. So that could really swing the cut. But 16 and 17, 2 par 4s over 500 yards sound like bogey holes, or at least challenging holes, not birdie holes where you can give it up. And even closing on the other 9, just thinking about how the cut is going to play out, the guy's starting on the back, finishing on the front. You have that 237 par 3, a 440 par 4, which probably shouldn't be too much of a problem. Then a 500-yard par 4. It does seem like they've squeezed most of the difficult holes towards the end of the 9s.
Yeah, the closing stretch on the back 9 would definitely be harder, in my opinion. Even though there is a par 5 there, those par 4s before it are brutal. Like I said, one was a converted par 5, 17. 9's not that hard. It's long on the scorecard, but it's bombs away. It might be the widest landing area on the whole property. Like I'm not someone who hits driver often. I spray it all over the woods, and this is a hole where there's no doubt in my mind I was hitting driver. So you can kind of spray it. I noticed, I think you brought it up in a previous show. There's a lot of the Flyover show, a lot of like fescue and areas of that looks like it's hard to play out of. When I played it, it was completely cut down. So
okay.
Yeah, that was like completely gone. Maybe they grow it up, but there's no chance it gets back to like the 2 feet fescue that it used to be.
Well, that's good news then, because as someone who plays at living where I live, playing at a fescue all the time, fescue is actually not that difficult. You can get a bad lie. It's very akin to when I played at Pinehurst number 2, that when you hit it into the wiregrass area, 90% of the time your lie is fine and you can hit it out. and you might get absolutely screwed if it bounces into the wrong spot. Fescue is very much like that, I find.
Yeah, as long as you can find it, you can probably get a club on it. But like, I, 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 you know, again with my wayward drives, I was in it often. But yeah, it was very playable. I would expect it to be up a bit, but I think they did cut it just so that patrons can walk around and stand in it instead of having people, knee deep in grass. They're giving them a place to stand. So yeah, there's a yeah, there's definitely less trouble out there than there used to be. Again, it's just straight driver long irons all day.
How much was the fescue actually in play? Because it did seem like it was somewhat of an aesthetic for the
Yeah,
course rather than being somewhere where your ball actually goes.
I mean, that's one thing when you're playing with guys like me and amateurs is it's in play is the definition changes there. These guys don't quite spray it nearly as much. I wouldn't say it's in play at all. You'd have to hit one very squirrely to find it. So yeah, there isn't that much, to be honest.
There's a number 6 is a par 4, 350 yards, 375 for number 12. Those are the two short par 4s. Can they rig it that one of those is drivable any of the days?
6, I think, could be drivable all 4 days. It's a downhill. It's iron off the tee for a lot of people, but if you can hit it 330, you can probably get it there. I think they should play it at 320, 330 and give these guys a chance to drive it because there aren't a lot of birdie holes. And I would say like the trouble around there does make it tricky. It's a bit tight. There's a couple of greenside bunkers that are deep and probably tough to play out of. I think it would be a good, risk reward hole. And there probably will still be guys, laying back with iron and flipping a wedge in. So I do hope to see them play that shorter than 350. I could see that. The other one you mentioned, trying
Number
to think of
number 12.
12. No, not drivable. Again, one of those holes I described as kind of a sweeping dog leg with an elevated green. Most guys would probably drive it, maybe 50, 60 yards short of the green. Definitely not a hole you can run the ball up on. So you're probably gonna have an elevated, wedge shot up to a relatively tricky green, if I remember. But yeah, not drivable, I wouldn't say. Just number 6.
Do you like the course?
Of the 3 on the property, it's my least favorite just because, and that's not like saying it's bad. It's just not my cup of tea. It's just too big. I didn't find it very interesting. Like I've been saying, it's kind of just rip driver all the way around. Maybe kind of what they've been talking, when Quail Hollow kind of got talked down on, where there's no strategy really. You just pull driver every hole and do that 14 times around. So that's not like my favorite type of course to play. I don't hit it a mile, so it's not. Again, I'd rather just kind of navigate my way through a golf course. So for me personally, it's not my favorite, but I could see why it could hold up and put on a good test for the best players in the world.
If you could pick a course where this would have to be every year, whether they wanted it or not, you could force it upon them to host the Canadian Open. That's in the GTA, so just the surrounding Toronto area. Where do you think it would be? Because I know that they've tried it for years, probably decades now, to get the National to host one of these ones, and their members are always like, not a chance.
Yeah, I've never seen the National. I've just heard it's insanely hard. That would be cool. I mean, yeah, that's a tough one. I like the rotation. I don't know, but St. George's did it for me. That was my favorite media day. Just an unbelievable course, one that you never get to play or really see just because it's so exclusive. So that's probably where I would keep going back. But again, the members hate it. I'm almost at the point where it's like I'm done seeing it in Ontario and move it
Yes, there we
elsewhere.
go.
I live 30 minutes from all these venues, so I'm happily to keep it here. But like, I'd rather just see it expand. Go to Alberta, go to Vancouver, go out east. I know it's not something RBC wants, so it's just never really going to happen.
I'm shocked it doesn't rotate at least once every 3 years between like Toronto. I mean, I'll throw Hamilton in as a part of Toronto.
Yeah.
That you go Toronto, Hamilton, Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, Toronto, Hamilton, Calgary. Just every 3 years hold it out west. It's not like these are small population centers.
No, they're like dying to see golf.
They were talking about having a live tournament in Calgary at Mickelson National. And like they probably would have done good business for Liv coming to Canada. That the PGA Tour should really try to take advantage. Just correlate it when you have an out west US
Yeah.
Open.
They go to Pebble often, so I'm sure they can find a West Coast venue, Shaughnessy or any of those. You
Like
speak to all
Shaughnessy,
these.
that's probably my favorite Canadian Open ever
Yeah,
was the Shaughnessy one.
I know. I spoke to Nick Taylor a few years ago after he won the Canadian Open. And he said like Shaughnessy, if they could have that there every year, like that would be by far his favorite tournament. He's from the West Coast, probably a little biased, but I would like to see it rotate. I'm kind of getting in on that camp just because, yeah, we've got to spread our wings a little bit and kind of show what the whole country has to offer, not just a 30-minute loop around Toronto.
And it does make it feel like a bigger event and a real national open at the same time, too.
It's almost like, our market, the Toronto market, we need to almost miss this tournament. And the fact that it keeps coming back every year, we don't miss it. It's now becoming like a yearly thing. We'll see. I mean, there's rumblings that RBC might not be continue their support of this tournament. They have Heritage and the Canadian Open, so it's getting very expensive to put these tournaments on. So there might be an opportunity here in the future where there's a new sponsor that comes in, maybe another Canadian company that wants to take it elsewhere. So I'm not saying that's for sure or not, but I've heard that RBC might be moving on. We'll see. I think they have it for next year as well. So for now, it's going to stay where it is, but that could come down the line.
All right, Eric Patterson, EPatt. Check him out at The Score. Thanks for being on.
Appreciate you having me. Yeah, enjoy Toronto when you're here.
I most definitely will. And if you don't have to work on the Saturday, come down to the live show.
Yeah, I'll try to make my way down there. It's a busy week though.
It's only a 3-hour drive from the course, probably to downtown Toronto in the middle of Saturday, so you should be fine.
Yeah, I should be fine. Toronto traffic's nothing.
Yeah, just tell Michael Kim that I think he's playing. If he ends up missing the cut, tell him to come down to the show.
We'll Uber down together. That'll be fun.
See, that'll be perfect. All right, coming up after the break, we're going to dig into the model to see if we can find some players we actually want to target this week at the Canadian Open. The Travelers Championship, the Northeast one and only PGA Tour signature event. Can it surpass the excitement of last year's thrilling finale when Scottie Scheffler broke away from the loaded leaderboard with 3 straight birdies in the back 9 during the final round, leading to a dramatic one-hole playoff with Tom Kim winning him his 6th PGA Tour victory of the year? Will Scottie repeat as champion? Come watch as the world's best PGA Tour players try to dethrone him. All of them competing all 4 days at TPC River Highlands. The action begins June 19th and runs through June 22nd. For tickets and information, visit TravelersChampionship.com to see the greats, including Scottie Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele, Ludwig Oberg, and the rest. The Travelers Championship. There is only one. Thanks to EPatt, we're going to head on over to fantasynational.com to talk about the field and try to figure out the stats based on what we've just been told. Just for a reminder, TPC Toronto is a par 70, 7,389 yards, bent grass, POA mixed greens, 6,500 square foot greens, 48 bunkers, only 3 water hazards, and if you just look at the scorecards, next week is going to be a par 70 at Oakmont, and there's only 15 yards of difference on the scorecard between this course and that course. So just keep that in mind that maybe this is a nice precursor event, and when we see more tournaments being held at TPC Toronto, that's the route that we can go to. As I mentioned, there's a lot of players in this field. Some guys I didn't even mention. You got Alex Noren and Eric Cole, Thorbjorn, Rio Hisatune is playing, Matty Schmidt, and even like to the bottom end, you got Keith Mitchell, Alex Smalley, EVR. I totally forgot about Bobby Mack, who is the defending champion at this course. So there's a lot going on here, and we need to build out a model. Just taking a look at the overall strokes gained model coming in, which I have attributed to the same one that I run every single week just to get a baseline of how players are doing. Approach means more than off the tee, but I'm probably going to add distance to this as well once we really try to customize it. But just taking a look at the model rank right now, the best players over the past 24 rounds coming into this: Rory, Connors, Lowry, Norlander, good luck with that, Eric Cole, Harry Hall, Thorbjorn Olesen, I didn't realize Thorbjorn was playing so well, Davis Riley, Matt McCarty, Clanton, nice spot for Clanton coming in here, especially as he's a guy who absolutely mashes off the tee. I actually like tricky Ricky Castillo as well. I got to see where his off the tee numbers are really good. I got to see where his distance is. Dude can't putt to save his life, but maybe he will this week. Who knows? Heath Satune, Keith Mitchell, Robert McIntyre, Damon Gibbons, Smalley, and Griot. There's EVR. Noren's down there. Ryan Fox, Kevin Yu, my guy, who just loves being a ball striking maven, except for at the PGA Championship. Like the first ever time he putted well was there, and he didn't do anything else that he normally does. You can see, 6.4 strokes gained on the greens. That was the only time in his past 10 starts he's gained. He gained 6.4, came in 50th because it was, 6.3, 6.4, 8, 5.3, 4.2 tee to green. No, minus 4.6 in a major championship. Thanks for it. I actually had money on Kevin Yu that week. Didn't really work out. But we can see with Ricky Castillo coming in, the approach numbers have been amazing. The putting numbers, not so hot, but the chipping's actually been pretty good as well. The tee to green just overall has been very solid for him. Overall, not a very good putter. Although we're not on Bermuda anymore, he is positive in his career on both Paspalum, which we don't have, and this is a bent POA mix. He has no weighted rounds on POA grass, so maybe if it leans more bent, or maybe he's just very uncomfortable with Bermuda, considering he's losing 0.35 per event when putting on that surface. We just get rid of that and just get him around neutral. Maybe he could be pretty good as a long shot here, but obviously we're going to be looking at the top. Is this a Rory event? Is it not? Can we go with someone else? And it really depends on what his odds are going to be. So let's build out a new model for the Canadian Open. We'll call this Can Open. Yes, we can. TPC Toronto. So based on what EPatt walked me through, I do think that driving distance is going to be more important than anything. I do think that there will be something to accuracy, obviously. So I'm just going to add strokes gained off the tee along with this, only because I'll get the distance lean, and obviously distance makes up a lot of what you do off the tee, but it will give some weight to the more accurate hitters who still pose slightly above average to average or slightly below average, if that's going to be the case. I want to take a look at these long par fours as well, 450 to 500 yards, and then we don't know what the actual proximity buckets are going to be, but it does seem like there's going to be a lot of longer approaches when you're almost a 7,400 yard course and you're a par 70. That's just inherently going to be the case. Oh, that's par threes. We don't want that one. We're going to throw in proximity 175 to 200. That's, once again, I almost clicked it again, and then 200 plus, just to give ourselves a sense. We're not going to weight it too highly, because we're going to have strokes gained approach in there as well, which I'm going to put directly next to this in the model, so we can get a sense of guys that are hitting their irons well, and where is that coming from? Is it coming from these long irons? Is it coming from wedges? Obviously, there's going to be many ways to take over this course, and we're trying to look for the most predictable ways to do so. We're going to throw strokes gained approach onto that as well. We're not going to get too complicated at a course that we don't know a ton about. Frankly, you could probably parse this exact same model over next week to the US Open if you really wanted to, because these are the things that we want to see come from the US Open type players. Distance, long irons, and can you make some putts? So we'll throw putting into the mix. We'll go 5 to 10 and 10 to 15 feet. The actual scoring ranges of this. It's going to be important to check the weather forecast as well, because it being a big, wide open course, that wind, without the amount of trees around that you're used to having at courses like this, wind should make more of an impact. Kind of reminds me a little bit of that random course where they used to play the Byron Nelson before they went to the Bunny Ranch. They had the Zoysia Greens. They thought it was going to be an awesome Trinity Forest in Dallas. I could see that the layout, obviously not exactly the same, and obviously there's not Zoysia greens and fairways here, so it's not going to be sitting up on a tee for everyone, which is, I would like to play on Zoysia greens all the time, but that's not going to be the case at what was the formerly Osprey Ridge North Course, now TPC Toronto, but just mimicking the look of the course, how the layout looks with a big wide open, could be very wind affected. As EPatt mentioned, there's been PGA Tour of America's events here before, one very wind impacted after the renovation. So we're going to just kind of get a sense here. That's what I like about the sliders on Fantasy Nationals, that you can kind of move them around to where you want them to be and where you want the weightings to be without putting in actual percentages. And then all of a sudden it will kind of weight it out for you, because I want putting to be about the same, approach to be a little bit more, distance a little bit less, and then we'll put in off the tee. So 17% distance, 14% off the tee, approach at 22%. We're going to move that up a little bit more to 25, 10% for the long par fours. The proximity ranges 175 over 200 at 8 and 9 apiece, 5 to 10 for putting, 10%, 10 to 15 putting, 9%. We're just going to run this, see what happens. I'm sure it's going to tell us Rory, but who else is it going to tell us over the past 24 rounds? Okay, here's what we got. We got Rory, Connors, Keith Mitchell, Clanton, Matty Schmidt, all inside the top 5, and that's probably not just based on Matty Schmidt's prodigious putting performance at Colonial last time out. In fact, let's see here. Yeah, he gained 8.6. He had lost in 3 straight coming in, but the approach play has been immaculate for him. And as you can see, distance-wise, he rates 20th in this field over the past 24 rounds. Distance is something that you want to get more, even to look at an accelerator for that. And you can do that by going up to... Let's see here. How do I do this? Course find. No, that is not what I want to do. I want to go to stats. Here we are. Let's go to distance. So that's under fairways and greens. And under time frame, we're going to go to... We get the rolling report? Where's the rolling report at? That's what I want to look at. We want to look at the rolling report, rolling model. There we are. And we're going to take a look at strokes gained, driving distance over the long term, just to see if there's anyone who's picking up both ball speed, distance off the tee, and then you won't be subjugated to exactly the same courses, some of which would have been less than driver off the tee, something like Colonial a week ago. So it's putting a bit more context into the stats that we want to be looking at. So we'll take a look at rank instead of score. Let's see here. We can click through all of this. Yeah, we'll just take a look at all of it and just take a look at the modeling rank. So it's Champ. He's actually been losing a little bit. So Champ, Brendan Matthews, Rory, Nicholas Norgard, Muller, and Jesper Svensson both up there a lot, and they continue to be very good. And if we just sort by last 100 over time, and we can see if anyone's losing a little bit. And some guys are. You can see Goddard has fallen down a little bit overall from his past 100. He's lost a little bit of distance off the tee, and this is in comparison to the rest of the field. I wouldn't really care about last 4. You just go last 100 to last 24. Probably gives you a better example because it has a bigger sample of courses to play. Like you can see that like Toasty is at 5.6 over his past 4 rounds. Let's go and look where he's played over his past 4 rounds. He probably missed the cut at Colonial would be my guess. And yeah, he missed a cut at Colonial, which is a less than driver course. So obviously he doesn't feel the need to go balls to the wall here. I actually like Toasty this week. Olesen was the other one I wanted to look at. Why is Olesen popping? He's made 4 cuts in a row. The tee to green has been immaculate. Okay, maybe Thunder Bear. As long as he doesn't piss on anyone on a plane on the way there, I think we're going to be good. Ben Ann, Wyndham Clark, Thor Bjornsson has retained much of it. I really like Thor Bjornsson this week. We'll have to see what his hip injury is all about. If he's back in the field and is going to play after withdrawing from Colonial, it seems like he's going to be fine. He had been on a pretty nice run, was actually kind of in the mix of the PGA Championship for a while until he went away. Mitchell, Woodland, Ludwig, Rasmus, Mullenix, there's Svensson, Nikolai Højgaard, Nicholas Norgard, Muller up there as well. Jake Knapp is another one who's playing this week. Tim Whiting, Will Gordon, Taylor Moore. There's Clanton. There's Christoph Ventura. Celinda, another one that I want to go to. This could be a very nice Ryan Fox course as well. Obviously, he got the win, contended for a little bit at the PGA Championship. What did he end up coming at the PGA Championship? Wow, T28. He really fell off the face of the earth. But he got the win at the alt event to get him into the major, and that's the only reason he qualified for the PGA Championship. Celinda has been going backwards a little bit, but at a Bombers type course, he has been very good. Was not good at the CJ Cup, but a lot of that was weekend problems. Houston, you don't need the accuracy in Houston that you probably do need at TPC Toronto. Ditto for the Mexico Open, but those were the 2 places where he had done really well. You can kind of backtrack to Ricky Castillo as well. Bombers course for the CJ Cup. Valspar, he actually did pretty well. So he's been a bit of a sort of different animal where he's gaining off the tee, but the strokes gained approach are pretty good as well. We'll see where Tricky Ricky Castillo rates 46, like he's just above average in terms of distance gained on the field. If we kind of do it the other way, who's like the worst of all these players? Mike Weir. It's a lot of the old Canadians who were in the field, along with Kisner, Kuchar. Mantasero doesn't have a ton of distance. Neither does Lipsky or Camillo. Lowry doesn't have a ton of distance, but he does actually gain off the tee. Hisatune and Noren, not big up there either. Ditto for Tom Kim or Justin Rose. If that's the path you want to take, I'm not here to tell you that driving distance is the end-all be-all this week. That's not what I'm getting at, but because it is a new course, then we need to start considering what we care about this week. What lane are we going to pick coming in? And this is the lane that I want to pick because I think it's the path of least resistance and to beat up on the 2 par 5s if you can do that. Can we go back to rank? Yeah, let's just refresh here. We put a lot of info in here now that we have built out the model for the Canadian Open. Let's take a look at the shorter term stuff in terms of past 12 rounds to see if it gives us anything different from the players that we were looking at before. So Rosner ends up coming out as number 1. I don't think that's really translated well for him, although his 5 to 10 putting good. Not so hot from the 10 to 20. I bet overall, not so hot. Yeah, actually the putter's been a little bit better, to be perfectly honest. He's actually been in the positives. And we don't need him to gain 8 strokes putting. We need him not to lose 3 and 4 every single time. The approach play has been awesome. Off the tee has been awesome. We haven't seen him in a while, but other than that, it's pretty good. Distance above average in this field, 53rd. So he's not getting his weight from that. He's getting his weight from these long approaches, the deeper approaches, which he is hitting really well. And that's translated to success on par 4's 450 yards. I mean, those two things tend to go hand in hand. With Rory, it's not so much because Rory hits it so goddamn far that he's not hitting this proximity range all that often. So that's less meaningful for him because he's not hitting a ton of 175 shots. He's hitting a ton of 150 shots where these guys are hitting from 175. So that's not as big of a bucket for Rory and most of the big driving distance players that you would see. The guys in the range where you'd want them are the Rosner range, like 40 to 100 in driving distance. We'll see more from these areas. Obviously, from long range, you'd like Rory to be better in the very short term, but Rory hasn't been awesome since he won the Masters. He's been good, not great. Obviously, was not great at the PGA Championship. He was good at the Truist. That was mainly driver and putter type stuff. Like, this is how you win the Rocket Mortgage. That's not how you win the Truist in a signature event against a lot of players. But his irons have just simply not been all that good. I mean, if there's a reason to fade Rory this week, it is because of that. Do you want to do that? That I don't know. If he comes in at plus 250, I mean, he's going to be a fade for me. I don't know if he's going to be a fade for you. We'll see how that goes. I'm still holding out hope that Nick Taylor wins this weekend at Memorial. I'm recording this before he is teed off on his first hole for the 3rd round. He goes into the final round tied with Ben Griffin. Would love that cash in my account if Nick Taylor can come through, or at least get himself into a spot where if it's him and Scotty towards the end, there's like an acceptable hedge that I can make out because it's enough money that I would hedge onto Scotty just to ensure that he doesn't run down Nick Taylor and I end up with just, the top 8 each way, which is still a very nice payout. Makes me a big winner for the week, but I got a 250, I got a 200, I got a 150 on Nick Taylor this week. It would be tremendous. This leads me to believe that is not going to happen, and the guy who is top 5 in both chipping and putting is not going to sustain that for the rest of the time. So who else is up here? Taylor Pendrith, I think, is the Canadian who sets up best for this course. I was not tracking him at the Memorial. So I actually have no idea how he's doing, but I can effort that for you using the Fantasy National app. He's T18, all right? That's not bad. 8th in approach, just terrible in putting. So Pendrith, I think, is the most live option of the Canadians. Although you see that Connors does rate out a little bit better, especially because of the long iron approaches. But Pendrith has that more prodigious distance. He's 30th in the field, 12th in distance, 12th off the tee overall. So a good blend of distance and accuracy. That's really the Rory McIlroy type formula here is why he could potentially lap the field here. You see Thorbjornsen is up there as well, as is Kurt Kitayama. And Griot goes about it a different way. I wouldn't like Griot as much, but farther down the list as a long shot, I would prefer Ricky Castillo because I don't think that we know what his upside is. I think it's untapped at the moment. And in the short term, he rates out 11th in this model, so I can get on board with that. Cam Champ rates out 6th. See, that's a lot of driving and off the tee, although the long proximity has been good for Cameron Champ as well. The approach play overall has not, but we do know he is a player that can run a hot putter, so if he's 300 to 1, that's a different story than if he's 70 to 1. At 300, I have interest. At 70, I have none. Davis Riley continues to play great golf, missed the cut at Colonial, but overall has been very good. Number 1 in that big proximity range. You do have to worry with a player of the level of Davis Riley is he I don't want to say cooked, but is his run over at this point? Did he hit his window? Did he not win? And now we're back on the other side. We've seen this throughout the course of the year. It's happening to my guy, Michael Kim, at the moment. He's still making the cut at signature events, making the cut at majors, but dude was in contention like every single week. And then his odds got beat down to the point where he became virtually unbettable. He didn't win in his window, so it feels like he's on the downside of that. We'll see if he can reignite himself for the rest of the season, but guys eventually start playing back to their baseline. That's why I'd have somewhat of a worry at Davis Riley. If he even comes in at 50-1 here, that seems like not necessarily an unbettable number to me. It's just not a good number. I'd rather bet Ricky Castillo at 150-1, who's essentially the same guy right now. He's just hitting fewer putts, but actually rates out better in the ball striking department. Luke Clanton comes in at number 15. Clanton hasn't played since, I think, Honda or Cognizant when he got his tour card. No, Valspar was the last time, but tons of distance off the tee. The putter is hot and cold. You get a hot week, you could be good to go. And generally, his approach play has been very good in this field. Luke Clanton right now is... Where the hell did Luke Clanton go? 23rd in driving distance. You love to see it. Thorbjornsen, number 14 in distance over this short period of only 12 rounds. These are the guys coming in with really good form. Other than that, you got Nikolai Højgaard. Harry Hall continues to play really good golf, as does Lee Hodges. This is just another event where you probably bet Keith Mitchell first round leader and be done with it for the rest of the week, because it's not going to go well once you get to the weekend. John Kiefer is up there. Justin Rose, Rath, both Højgaards, Bobby Mack, Sexy Roy. He's not your Roy toy, but he does come in 32nd in the overall rankings right now. EVR up there. Carson Young would not be the prototypical type of player that I would be going towards. Pearson Coody is an alternate for this event, so he's not officially in the field. He'll have to Monday queue his way in or get a few guys to WD, which might happen. Who knows? Woodland is up there, the Bram Wagon. These are the guys that we want to be targeting this week. Dietrich could be a good play just because we might be seeing a turnaround from him. At least he made the cut at Memorial. That's all I'm really concerned about, because it's been a lot of red on the screen for old Thomas Dietrich outside of no-cut signature events where he's still finishing outside the top 30 in fields of 70. At least there was a cut this week, and he did make it, albeit most of the field ended up making the cut. Probably not going to be for me, but at least we're seeing a little bit of signs of him doing a bit better. If Toasty didn't miss every short putt, he's last in the field, basically, in 5 to 10 foot putting. But maybe he can put it together. Maybe a top 10 bet, maybe an each way, depending on what he comes in at. But that's going to be the case for me. These are the players that I want to be targeting. Where did Rosner rates out? I was like, where did Rosner go? It's like, oh yeah, he's number 1 as we go through it. We're going to get more information on this course as the week goes along. We'll be talking about it a ton on the show. But briefly, these are the targets that I want to go with first. And a lot of this will end up on price sensitivity of where you want to wager your money, or at least what we can stomach as an acceptable bet coming into the week. All right, it's time to guess the odds for the RBC Canadian Open. Rory is going to be the betting favorite of this tournament. How high of a betting favorite is he going to be? I'm going to say he opens at plus 275. And that makes him pretty unbettable to me, especially where his approach play is at the moment, knowing that he's just trying to fine-tune his game. Not that he's going to not show up to win. He's won this tournament twice the past 4 iterations of it. Brand new course, a course that sets up for him perfectly. If he wins by 10, I'm not going to be surprised. Plus 275, probably not going to get my money. After that, it gets a little bit more complicated where the next guy on the board is going to be. I'm guessing it's going to be Ludwig Oberg, who's not playing great golf at the moment, but still carries that name cachet and is a good course fit. I'm going to say he's 14-1. I'll say that Lowry is 16-1, and Corey Connors will be 18-1 in this tournament. I think those are going to be your 4. After that, you're into Burns, Sungjae, Robert McIntyre. Those will probably be the next 3. Maybe Taylor Pendrith or Nick Taylor get themselves into that mix as well. But probably Burns as the 5th guy on the board. Maybe Sungjae sneaks in too. They'll be 22-25 to 30-1 on the odds board upon release. And then you're getting Tom Kim. Luke Clanton is a real wild card here. I bet you Clanton opens at 45-1 and gets bet down throughout the course of the week. If the number is above 45, I probably will bet Luke Clanton to win this tournament. Other than that, you'll get Max Homa continues to be overvalued in terms of the odds for a guy who has 1 good round a week now. Better than his previous 0 good rounds a week. So that's a positive. And maybe he's on his way back. He just doesn't feel like a guy who's going to pop up and win a tournament anytime soon because of that. Like even the first round at Memorial. Like, hey, he's firmly in the mix. What happens in round 2? +7. That's not great. So I would expect him to be in that like 40 to 1, 35 to 1 range. You'll probably get Nick Taylor for a better number, weirdly enough, as we go through. Wyndham Clark should be up there. Gallo will still carry some cachet with him as well, but it's Rory, Ludwig, Connors, Lowry, Burns, Sungjae, Pendrith, and then the rest, depending on the book that you go to. I recommend going to Coolbet, because if you want to win a trip to Cabot for this summer, if you're Canadian and outside of Ontario, you can enter that right now. It's all down in the description, as is getting some underdog bucks, $1,000 bonus funds deposit if you use code Mayo. Different ways to skin the cat this week in playing the Canadian Open. That's how I see the odds going. Reminder to all of you, smash the like, sub to the channel. We got full-time Canadian Open, kicking off U.S. Open player by player and research, and maybe even a walkthrough on TrackMan as well. I went back and I watched every single one of Dustin Johnson's shots from 2016, so at least I know how he did it. I can't believe he didn't win by 20 strokes after watching how well he played, especially in the first 2 rounds. It was mind-boggling that he wasn't leading after round 1. Andrew Landry was. But hey, sometimes guys just roll a hot putter and play good enough to get it going. But we're going to have all of that content coming this week. And of course, the live show is next Saturday. You ever want to meet the gang and get a Cuss Corner live? Now is your chance. Tickets on sale in the description of this podcast. All right, I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!